Hello everybody, I'm KC, and welcome to our edition of Let's Talk About, and welcome to the latest installment of To Infinity War and Beyond. Much like Phase 2, the proper start to Phase 3 concludes one of the franchises that started it all in Captain America: Civil War. After superhero battles caused too much collateral damage and many civilian casualties, the government wants to put our heroes under stricter guidelines. Cap is against this, and it gets even more personal for him as Bucky returns and is a wanted man. So Steve has to prove his oldest friend's innocence, but has to go through his newest friends to do it. Civil War was the movie I was most looking forward to revisiting when I sat down to work on this series. It's widely regarded as the best Marvel movie so far, and I couldn't be happier about that, since I had a couple of concerns when this was originally announced. One, anyone I know who knows anything about comics claims that the comic this movie is inspired by is a steaming pile of Build-Snipe droppings. I might be paraphrasing there. And this was only the second Marvel franchise to hit the trilogy mark. The first was... yeah. So for two reasons that I believe were understandable, only one of which matters. As good as Marvel's track record was, I had my doubts. But I don't think I've ever been more happy to be proven wrong. There's a running joke among fans that this is basically Avengers 2.5, but even though there are a dozen featured characters in this movie, some of which are making their debut appearances in the cinematic universe, this is still a Cap-centric story. Most of the conflict, character moments, and overall actions in this movie are centered around him. It would have been easy for Cap to get lost in the shuffle, but they know how to make his final film entry a great feature for him. Even if Cap doesn't get a triumphant conclusion, he gets a powerful one. This may be the most complex Marvel movie yet. Despite their best efforts, our heroes find out that while they were saving the world, they left a lot of carnage behind, and they feel the full effects of that realization and their actions. Except for in London, because Thor's not there. This is a very multi-layered and complicated issue, and each team member has a different and understandable reason for how they feel about enlisting with the government. A big part of the movie's marketing was asking, whose team are you on? But really, you can understand everyone's point of view. It makes you look at the issue of superheroes being placed under restrictions and held accountable for their actions, regardless of intention, from all angles. And that is insanely difficult to pull off. Even the comic couldn't do it. Since Steve and Tony are the two biggest forces on each side, let's use their outlooks as an example. And even though this is Cap's movie, we're gonna start with Tony, because he was here first. So I've kept saying that Tony's major character arc is about the responsibility of being a hero, and that takes a really interesting turn. You'd think Tony, of all people, would be against the government placing any kind of restrictions on his actions as Iron Man. This is the same man who said this to the United States Senate.
We're safe. America is secure. You want my property? You can't have it. But I did you a big favor. I have successfully privatized world peace.
He became Iron Man because he saw how his inventions were being misused, and he thought he was the only one he could trust to protect the world. But after all the mistakes he's made on the job, and especially after the Ultron incident, he doesn't even trust himself anymore. No matter how dumb some of the decisions he makes are, Tony always wants to help and protect others. And now he's being confronted with the reality that even as Iron Man, he is still causing mass destruction and lives are being lost. Sure, many are being saved, but for Tony, that's not enough. He doesn't trust himself to make the right decisions anymore. So he's very much for this proposal if it means more people will be helped. Steve, on the other hand, holds the highest regards for his own convictions and virtues. It's his defining character trait. He certainly cares about the people who have been hurt, but living his first days as a superhero in a time when casualties of innocent people was frequent and senseless makes him understand that you just have to do the best you can to protect as many people as possible, even if that's not everyone. He doesn't let things like that get to him, even though he does care very deeply about the little guy. It's why he wanted to fight in the first place. It's not like Steve wants to stir up trouble, he's just against the idea of being held back when he could be saving lives. People are getting hurt during the Avengers battles, yes, but Cap knows that more people will get hurt if they have to sit on the sidelines until they get approval to go stop a villain, or to be told who they are allowed to fight. And there's the fact that Cap's trust in government organizations is probably not the highest of the group. Let's remember that this is the same government that launched a nuke at the most populated city in the country and didn't realize that a Nazi subdivision was infiltrating and corrupting one of their most powerful organizations for over half a century. I'm just saying. It doesn't help that this whole proposition is being handled by that jerk of a general from The Incredible Hulk. Though it is nice to see someone besides Bruce from that movie again. In fact, the Russo brothers chose Ross specifically for this role because they felt The Incredible Hulk may have been forgotten about a little bit. Gee, you think? This conflict is what makes the movie work. There's a good amount of perspective on all sides. Vision has a point. There are enemies that the heroes themselves created. Abomination, Yellow Jacket, Loki, Ultron were all products of the heroes' actions. On the other hand, there are a lot of threats that would have arisen regardless of whether or not superheroes were there to intervene. Even though they align with Loki, I'm sure the Chitauri would have invaded Earth anyway. Red Skull, Pierce, Malekith, all would have been threats, and our heroes had the freedom to stop them from causing massive harm without authorization. But everything gets even more intense once things start to get personal, because guess who's back in all of his anti-hero glory? Bucky is the catalyst for the escalation of Steve's actions against the government. They want to arrest Bucky, but Cap finds out he's getting his memories back and is being framed. So Cap won't turn him in until he can prove his innocence and find the true villain behind all of this. But in the process, the ripples among Earth's mightiest heroes get even larger. Okay, this is already getting long, so characters, lightning round edition. With going from agreeing to the Accords to make sure she fights on the right side to deciding to help her friend above all else, Black Widow gets some excellent development. Hawkeye's back, which is awesome. Scarlet Witch at first transitions well into being a hero, but after she causes a major incident, we get some insight into how she views herself since she got her powers. And seeing her evolve into someone more confident in herself and her abilities is satisfying. She even has some nice moments with Vision, who, even though he is facing every problem, including the Accords, as logically as you would expect an AI character to, brings quite a bit of personality. Not so much in a quipping way like Tony, just more enjoying trying to fit in a human life. He's wearing a sweater for crying out loud, that's priceless to me. And there are even moments where we see that he's doing some soul searching himself and is still discovering who he is, which gives him and Wanda a nice connection. Even though they end up fighting each other, but they get over it pretty quickly. Ant-Man's back. And that's about it. They don't really expand on his character or anything. He's just there to pull off some really cool moves in the airport fight. And there's the debut of T'Challa, aka the Black Panther, played by Chadwick Boseman. And man, this guy came into the MCU strong. Even though I realized watching this again that he doesn't do that much. They do fit in T'Challa becoming king after the murder of his father flawlessly into the story of Cap trying to protect Bucky, and the origin of the Black Panther blends naturally into everything else going on in this movie. But until the end, T'Challa's only goal in the movie is to avenge his father by killing Bucky. And that's about all he does. But he has such a commanding demeanor that you can't help but see him as the center of attention. Not to mention that the costume looks so badass. But having said that, I'd argue that Panther is the third or fourth most developed character in this movie. And that's because of his actions during the final confrontation, which is a very powerful moment between him and the true villain. We really should have known right then and there that his solo movie was going to be one of the best ones. Oh, and this kid shows up during the airport fight. Some of you might have heard of him. The acting overall is absolutely superb, and everyone, especially the big three of this movie, are able to carry much heavier material than Marvel is used to flawlessly, and still slide in some charisma and upbeat personality between the serious moments. One of my favorite examples of this is when Steve and Bucky reminisce about a girl they knew before going into the final battle. You could argue that it wasn't really needed, but it shows progression in Bucky becoming his old self again, and how much Steve loves having him back. And considering that the majority of this movie revolves around Cap protecting him, it says a lot about all of this hopefully being worth it. The effects continue to impress and astonish, and they brought back the de-aging effect from Ant-Man, but this time with a young Robert Downey Jr. I think it's a bit more Uncanny Valley territory than the Michael Douglas effect, but I can't say it's not authentic. It's like I'm watching Only You again. Does anyone else remember Only You? It was a romantic comedy Downey did in the 90s with Marissa Oh.
It's so hard for me to believe that she's someone's aunt.
Yeah, well, they come in all shapes and sizes, you know.
I doubt anyone realized this but me, but that's pretty funny. The action takes the best elements from the fights in Winter Soldier and Age of Ultron to create some truly epic moments. It's adrenaline pumping, intense, very well shot and edited considering this is one of the few movies in recent memory that make shaky cam look good. And in the case of the airport fight, just plain fun, with one memorable moment after another. It's definitely the centerpiece of the movie, but as your parents told you way back when, it's all fun and games until someone gets hurt. That's probably the thing that resonated with people the most about this movie. Much like Winter Soldier, this movie sent a ripple effect that would be felt through the entire MCU. Sure, this movie does have a villain in the form of Zemo, played by Daniel Bruhl, and I wouldn't call him unnecessary, since he is a devious puppet master whose motives boil down to the exact thing the Avengers are fighting over, which is set up in a very clever way, but he never fights the heroes himself. He just lays the pieces in front of them and lets their emotions and reactions do the rest. While the airport fight was mostly fun, the final fight between Tony and Steve is just sad. It's brilliantly set up, and again, Cap's actions are in one form or another at the center of this conflict, with what I consider the most heart-wrenching reveal in the MCU, but that's just me. And the fight does look cool, but I don't think anyone walked away from this movie a little sad that these two didn't make up in some form or another. The overall ending is bittersweet at best, but in the end, absolutely marvelous. Whew, okay. Overall, while Captain America Civil War is not my favorite Marvel movie, I think I could easily call it the best, because it's a story that you could only tell in the MCU. It works as well as it does after you spend over a dozen movies with these characters, so very small actions speak volumes, keeping things moving without feeling disorienting. From cheering when the heroes show off their cool powers, to crying when they kill off one of the franchise's most beloved characters right after they canceled her TV show. Not cool, guys. Captain America's final film accomplishes so much with so many new and familiar characters with remarkable results. It's one of those movies that I could go on for probably another hour about. And if you have any doubts about the Russo brothers taking over the Avengers movies, I encourage you to give this one another watch. It proves that they are more than capable of handling it. If anything, it means more community cameos. We had Danny Pudi last time, Jim Rash is in this one. Come on, let's get Joel McHale in Infinity War or something. It could work. Well, anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Look 'em in the eye, ain't no higher. Summon all the courage you require. Then count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Number 10 paces, fire!